The Utah Jazz obviously traded away some important rotational pieces during the trade deadline period of the NBA season, but after that they've been on a slow stretch of 4 games in which they've dropped them, 2 of them actually being against the Golden State Warriors, which is a very formidable team that has a lot of interesting schemes that they run and tend to take advantage of more traditional rosters. With the Jazz now being forced to run a more traditional lineup with Walker Kessler being starting at the 5, it puts them in a situation where you see a lot more interesting looks against teams like the Golden State Warriors. It's important to know that Walker Kessler is a big key cog in the machine for how this team does, considering the fact that they've been giving up more points than what feels like ever this season in particular, and more so in their more recent games. Even so much so as to go to the game most recently that they played against the Warriors, where they lost 137 to 140 in a regulation game. Today we're going to take a slight dive into Walker Kessler's stats as a starter and compare them to how he was as a bench player, to question also what he can do to improve his own individual game and how the systems of next season and even later on this season can affect how he develops and how he can help this team win more games. With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. It's your boy Wraith Hoops. Go and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you're a Utah Jazz fan or if you just like NBA content. Let's go ahead and get into this one. The easiest way to look at it is to simply understand that Walker Kessler over the last 4 games has been slated back in and slid as the starting center. Being knowledgeable of this, you'll understand that he is currently playing 26.5 minutes a game. Usually most of his games hover around 25 minutes with a little bit of a margin of error. In that time period, he averages 9.3 points, 7.8 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 1.3 turnovers, and shoots 57.1% from the field on 7 field goal attempts, and has attempted 2 3-pointers, though he's missed them both, and on 1.3 free throws a game, he's hit all of them. Naturally, 4 games is a relatively small sample size, but it's something that's going to be good for us to look and gauge where he is right now as a starter, and then eventually where he could be towards the end of the season. What we do have a lot of answers on, though, is what he was as a bench piece. Across the 48 games that the Jazz have played this season, he has been on the bench in 31 of those matches, averaging 21.8 minutes during that stint. He averaged 8.1 points, 7.1 rebounds, 0.9 assists, 0.4 steals, 2.7 blocks, 0.9 turnovers, and shooting 68.9% from the field on just 5.2 attempts. He shot 7 threes during this stint and only hit 1 of them, as well as shooting 50.9% from the free throw line on 1.7 attempts a game. With those numbers laid out in front of us, we understand that the only difference between him being at the bench and as a starter is the amount of minutes that he played. He played roughly 5 minutes less, and because of that, he also shot less shot attempts, which led to a higher overall field goal percentage. He did take a couple more threes, but admittedly, it was over a substantially larger sample size of games, and he only ended up hitting 1 of those 7. So it's really non-existent for him in his game right now. A lot of times you'll see him outside the 3-point line, and he does a lot of DHOs, a lot of dribble handoffs. And it's in a situation where he might be the only guy outside the 3-point line, and the big won't come but so far up because they know he's not liable to put the ball on the deck and drive at the rim. That might be something that he might be interested in doing. He doesn't have to be particularly great at it, but being willing to put extra pressure on the defense just to allow his game to be a little bit more versatile might do wonders for him later on down the line. Overall, in Walker Kessler's 4 starts, the Jazz have given up 129 points twice to the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors in the first matchup, and then 138 to the Lakers, and then more recently, as of last night, 140 to the Golden State Warriors again. So overall, they are not doing particularly well, but we expected this because they depleted their reserves and don't really have that many great rotational pieces. This stage of the season is supposed to be focusing on the young talent and getting those guys up to speed. While we comprehend this, overall in the season, Walker Kessler averages 8.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 0.9 assists, 0.5 steals, 2.8 blocks, 1 turnover, shooting 65.2% from the field, 22% from 3, and 56% from the free throw line in just 23.4 minutes per game. These numbers aren't particularly terrific, but at the same time, it's still a significant part of who the Jazz identity will be in the future. Walker Kessler has the ability to be a dynamic shot blocker, and he's shown that at a substantial margin, already averaging that 2.8 so far this season. He has a knack for being in the right place at the right time, though sometimes he does get caught wanting at times because he does get airborne off of pump fakes, and that's never ideal because it's more easy to catch the guy out of position. And while the rules have been skewed a little bit to prevent offensive players from completely taking advantage of players that are jumping in a defensible position, it still ends up putting him in a rough spot because that does end up leading to, more often than not, a foul that should have never been called. Now, there is no perfect mold for the type of player that Walker Kessler is in today's game. He does follow more of the traditional role of a center back in the 90s. He doesn't particularly have a great jumper. His mid-range game isn't too great, but at the same time, he is known for having a decent level of athleticism that allows him to finish lobs at the rim. He's also a good screen and roller, though at times he can get a little bit too much of a wide base, which takes him longer to get set and kind of elongates the development of certain plays that they do run. But I digress, because overall he is the model of what you would like for your center to be in today's league. He's a 7-footer, he's 245 pounds. Could he put on maybe 5-10 more pounds? Perhaps. But overall, he doesn't have a slim frame. He's not too weak and vulnerable. He's a pretty comfortable mover. He slides his feet well on defense on the perimeter, and also is known for making his coin protecting the rim. Previous to the trade deadline, he was in the second unit, kind of anchoring things alongside the wing Ochai Agbaji, because you had Keontae George, Kelly Olynyk, and Jordan Clarkson, who aren't particularly great defenders, but they were able to funnel their men down towards Walker Kessler, and Walker Kessler would deter them from taking a good shot at the rim or just flat out erase it off the glass. However, now in his new role, he's been thrust into the starting lineup. He's facing against the day one A1 guys from each team, and he's going to have to go toe-to-toe with them. More recently against Draymond Green, things didn't particularly go well, and Draymond actually had 23 points in a game that saw Klay Thompson have a resurgence, but Curry was having an off night and was being guarded pretty well. So those are the sorts of things that are going to have to be worked on by Walker Kessler. He's going to have to be a little bit more rangy on defense, allowing himself to be in the right spot at the right time. Admittedly, a lot of zones get run by the Utah Jazz team, but even in man-on-man matchups or in zone matchups, he has to be able to be a very vocal leader on that side of the floor. One cannot be successful on defense without communicating. As many coaches say, a silent gym is a losing gym. And at times the Utah Jazz suffer because they don't communicate what side screens are coming from, if there is a screen at all, if the player is alone, or what kind of coverage they're going to go into when screens should occur. And that becomes a big thing, particularly the first time they played against the Golden State Warriors, and why they got beat the way that they did was because in a lot of situations, Keontae George would sink under the screen, or he just would allow the screen to take him out of the play without much resistance. This time, they were all more disciplined. There was a lot better communication, and regardless of who the shooter was, they always fought over the tops of those screens. Now, Walker Kessler's job originally was to protect the rim. They basically traded away Rudy Gobert and ended up somehow getting a Rudy Gobert in return, who might not be as particularly great at cleaning up the rim and just making opponents shoot a lower percentage than the league average, but it's a very close second compared to anybody else in the league except bar perhaps Victor Wembanyama. Understanding this, you still want to be able to rely on Walker Kessler to continue to expand his game. I would like for him to get a jumper. I've said it before, but even if he can't get a three-point shot, him being able to shoot a respectable 60 to 70% from the free throw line will do wonders, because people will not just easily foul him at the rim. Now, he isn't exactly the perfect ideal player to be finishing at the rim, because he does have a little bit of a knack for trying to take finesse layups instead of just punching the ball home or trying to dunk and getting fouled in the process. That's never going to be an ideal situation for him just because of the type of person that he is, apparently. And while I do think him becoming stronger and him being more aggressive on that side of the ball will do wonders for him, he's already a great rebounder, and I just want him to be able to maintain the production that he's already putting up and then just kind of add on it as time goes on. Again, the next 26 games of the season are all going to be building blocks for what comes next year, and just seeing where the rookies and where the sophomores are at, as well as where we think they can potentially end up going with this particular roster cast. I believe that there might be a couple moves made in the offseason, but who's to say, because we were waiting for a move to be made during the trade deadline and we just ended up being sellers. I think that Walker Kessler has the makings of being a perennial all-star defender with a pretty smooth offensive game that could see him at his peak, perhaps averaging closer to 15 or 16 points and really 10 to 12-ish rebounds. I do think he has that more traditional size, that more traditional skill set, but I think if he adds a little bit more of a better jumper, again, he was working out in the offseason with Kelly Olynyk, their shooting trainer, as well as Larry Markkinen, who again is one of the best big man shooters in the league, bar maybe Karl-Anthony Towns if you feel that way. But when you have guys like that on your roster, even though Kelly Olynyk got traded away, he still has Lowry, who's roughly his same height, has similar length, and can really help him make the adjustments that are necessary. Now, he doesn't shoot as much of a catapult jumper as he used to, and there's more of a wrist flick involved, but nevertheless, he still doesn't feel comfortable enough with it to initiate it and make it a part of the mainstay for the offensive system, which is understandable because you don't want him to necessarily be a detriment that just jacks shots, but you still want him to have a certain level of confidence that allows him to be successful when he's on the floor and be taken serious by opposing bigs. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know what kind of progress you expect from Walker Kessler, specifically going from now to the end of the season. And where do you think his peak will see him being? What player would you compare his game to? With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. It's your boy Ray Thus. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member to support the channel and receive future shoutouts. I'd like to shout out Cam and Flair for getting online with me and chatting this one up. And with that being said, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.